They say a man does not discover how high he can rise until he has fallen so deep that the sky itself becomes a memory. Let this tale be a lantern in the darkness for those who have stumbled, fallen, and forgotten the fire within. This is the story of Kael, a young man who had everything, or so it seemed. But what he would gain after losing it all would become the foundation of an unbreakable life. Kael was 22, a university top scorer, popular, handsome, confident. He was the one everyone admired, the one parents praised as the future. He walked the campus halls with a spark in his eyes and a charm in his voice. But what they didn't see was the weight he carried in silence. Kael lived for approval. Every grade, every smile, every applause, he needed it like air. And slowly, without noticing, he became a slave to perfection. When he didn't get the internship he dreamed of, something cracked. Then came a breakup with the girl he thought he'd marry. Then, the scholarship he hoped for slipped away. One by one, the illusions unraveled. His mind, once sharp and strong, became a battlefield. And no one knew, because Kael smiled, every single day. Until one night, that smile disappeared for good. It was 2:37 a.m. Kael sat alone in a cheap apartment, staring at his degree like it had betrayed him. Bills piled high. His bank account was almost empty. His dreams felt like lies. The world had gone silent. But inside him, a storm screamed. "Who are you, without success?" The voice in his head whispered. "Without applause? Without approval?" And then came the hardest question. "Are you even worthy, without it all?" Kael didn't have an answer. He stared at the ceiling and thought, maybe this is it. In that moment, rock bottom greeted him not as a sudden crash, but as a slow descent into darkness. He stopped eating properly. He stopped answering messages. He isolated. He slept all day, hoping to escape the pain of being awake. The world outside kept moving. His world, however, stood still. And yet, in the silence of despair, something ancient began to stir. Weeks passed. Then one night, Kael found an old notebook from high school buried under dust. Inside was a quote he had written when he was just 17. "A seed must first be buried in darkness before it can rise toward the sun." He read it again, and again, and then, he wept. Not because he was weak, but because deep down, he remembered who he once was. Before the world told him what to be. Before perfection buried his soul. That night, he took the first step. Not out of strength, but out of refusal to die this way. He whispered to himself, "I don't know how, but I will rise." Kael didn't wake up the next morning completely healed. But he woke up. He made his bed, ate a full breakfast, opened the blinds. Tiny things, insignificant to the world, but to Kael, each act was a battle won. He started journaling, then running, then applying for jobs. Once he was scared to try for before. Each rejection still hurt, each lonely night still echoed. But he had made peace with pain. He didn't run from it anymore. He faced it. A mentor once told him, "The pain that used to break you will one day build you." Kael didn't believe it then. But now, he began to see. The voice in his head no longer said, "You are nothing." It now said, "You are becoming." Months passed. Kael got a part-time job. Then a freelance gig. He learned new skills, grew his network, and slowly built a new foundation. But more than that, he rebuilt himself. He laughed again, not to impress, but to live. He showed kindness, not for validation, but because he knew what pain felt like. He didn't chase perfection anymore. He chased progress. One day, at a local seminar, he was invited to share his story. He stood before 300 young people and said, "Rock bottom didn't break me. It introduced me to the real me." The room went silent. And then, thunderous applause. But this time, Kael didn't need it, because he already knew his worth. What Kael discovered was this. Rock bottom isn't the end. It's the beginning, when you have nothing left. No applause, no followers, no comfort. What remains is truth. That truth? You are more powerful than you've been told. You are stronger than your fears admit. You are the author of your rebirth. Rock bottom strips away the masks, the lies, the noise, and what's left is potential. Pure, unfiltered, unstoppable. Kael now mentors others. He tells them what no one told him. Your greatest growth will come from your deepest pain. Your greatest strength will be born from your darkest hours. He lives proof that hitting the bottom is not a curse. It is a calling. And if you're there now, answer it. Because if Kael can rise, so can you. And when you do, you won't just walk again. You will fly. Young warrior, if you're reading this and you feel like you're at your lowest, remember, you are standing at the foundation of your future. The world has trained you to fear failure. But those who change the world, embrace it. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be brave enough to begin again. So rise. Stumble if you must, but rise. Because hitting rock bottom is not the end of your story. It's where the real story begins. If this story moved you, inspired you, or helped you see yourself differently, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs it. And most of all, subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories that speak to your soul and remind you of your greatness. Your comeback starts today. Let's rise together.